on the 49th day. The fourth day would be the 50th. Okay, and then this is, let's go to Acts 1:3. Okay, this is after Yeshua came back. Let's see. To whom also he showed himself alive after his passion, and by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of things pertaining to the kingdom of Yahweh. And that kind of goes on. I don't know if I need to read it. You all know the story. Anyway, he was there about 40 days since he resurrected, doing great miracles and stuff. And then we'll skip to verse 12, the same chapter. Too far. And then after he ascended up into heaven, and the angels asked him why they were gazing, in verse 12, they returned into Jerusalem from the Mount of Olivet, which is from Jerusalem a Sabbath day's journey. So we naturally would assume that that's a Sabbath day. Since it's a Sabbath day's journey, it was 40 some odd days afterwards. And then they kind of return to the upper room there, and they kind of appoint another apostle. And then it starts out in chapter 2, verse 1. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, which would be the 50th day, they were all with one accord in one place. And the story goes on. Well, the point of that is, Yeshua ascended to heaven on the same day that the law was given. And that kind of blew me away. And I would never have found that out without knowing these fixed dates. And you just keep running across different stuff, and it's really exciting. Anyway, where am I? That's probably a whole other talk in itself, but I thought it was very interesting that the 49th day he ascended to heaven, and 50th day is the Jubilee. So I don't know, just the timing. Well, the Pentecost is what happens on a yearly base of what the Jubilees does in a 50-year space, and the 49th Sabbath year, 50th Sabbath year. Anyway, it's all tied together. It seems to me like, anyway. So, where am I going to? So you're probably thinking, yep, you're pretty confident, you know all your stuff. Actually, I don't. But the scripture is pretty interesting. So if you run across scriptures, it should testify one scripture of another scripture. So I thought this one was interesting. Joshua 5:10. I think we already did that one, didn't we? But let's do it again, because you probably didn't know where I was going. Now that I told you the secret, you do. Okay, Joshua 5:10. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal. Now this is 40 years later than whenever he gave them earlier. So the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day, still the same set month, at even in the plains of Jericho. And after the Passover, Okay, let me just start that. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the selfsame day. And I thought that was like a testimony from Leviticus 23 that was the wave sheaf offering on the morrow after the Passover, because if you go back to Leviticus 23, keep your finger here, go to Leviticus 23 for a minute. They were not supposed to eat any of the crop or the old crop until the same day of the wave sheaf. And this is when they ate of the old cakes and parched corn the selfsame day, which was the morrow after the Passover. Which brings us right in conclusion with Leviticus 23, where ye shall eat neither bread nor parched corn nor green ears until the selfsame day ye have brought an offering unto your God. And it shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. And it shall be the morrow after the Sabbath. So, I've got another footnote here. And then I go on, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn. So that was the end of the manna, and they ate of the old fruit of the land. I got another footnote that I thought was kind of funny. I don't know why I got in here. Numbers 33. This is what I call the first wave sheaf.
Numbers 33.
Numbers 33:3. And they departed from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. And I kind of looked at that last night when I was going through my notes and wondered why I put that in there, but I found out why. It was the first wave sheaf. They grabbed their sheaves and waved goodbye to the Egyptians. No, I had to throw that in.
I like to compare Joshua 5 to Exodus 16. And it says at the end of Exodus 16, it says that they ate manna for 40 years. Okay, I don't have to front of me. And there's a school of thought there in Joshua 5. If you read the context, when the children came in, they had to be clean for 7 days and so forth after being circumcised and so forth, the children. So they couldn't have come in and kept the Passover being in a clean state in a matter of less than 72 hours, if you read the story flow. So some speculate there in Joshua 5, it doesn't say that it's the first month. On the 10th day of the first month was the Passover. So they suggest that could have been the second Passover that Numbers talks to us about if you're unclean, which would coordinate not to 39 years and 11 months, okay, because they came out, remember they came into the land a month later when the manna started. The manna didn't start the day they came out of Egypt. It started a month later. So if you count 40 years exactly, then that Joshua 5 would have been the second Passover, because it would have been equal to 40.
Well, he does give provision if you're unclean, but it doesn't really say that.
Well, the provision indicates how to do it, how to become clean.
It just says 14th day of the month.
I understand that. It doesn't say the first month. So if you look at the flow of when they came across, when they were circumcised and they had that Passover, that then they would have been unclean taking that Passover if it was the first month, if it was the first Passover. See, but Numbers, I think it's Numbers 9 or something, says it's the second Passover. So the point is that if that was the first month, it wouldn't have been a complete 40 years. If it was the second month, then it would, in comparison to Exodus 16 when they started eating the manna. It said they ate for 40 years. It said not 39 years, 11 months.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't study that part, but I was just studying the dates and going on that.
Probably the second Passover when that was, so they could have been clean to take it.
But it doesn't say which month, but it just says the 14th of the month.
It says the first one.
It does?
Where?
Where?
Are we talking numbers?
No, Joshua 5.
Joshua 5.
You know, does it specify what month Moses died? Because they would have had a 30-day mourning period, and that would have pushed it into the second month.
I don't know. I didn't study that. This is a study I did years ago, and I needed to get a talk together, and so I just went back to my notes and threw a few notes together real quick. So I don't know too much about
Something to think about.
the history in between
that.
that.
Study, believe me.
So
That's very good, very exciting.
anyway, this comes to the hard part. I mean the confusing part. Okay. How do we correlate this to today's way of thinking? Because, I mean, it's pretty simple if you think about it, and it makes it very simple. But when you come in today's correlation, we are going off of more of like Babylonian or Roman calendar, such to speak, and it's based upon a weekly cycle. And so it's a calendar kind of invented by probably Julius Caesar or somebody, and it was perfected by good old Pope Gregory, and that's kind of the one we use now. I think the Gregorian calendar is what they call it.
That's right.
Anyway, it was perfected by him, and basically it's all going off of a weekly cycle. And a weekly cycle is not fixed dates. It's a revolving, it's going up and down, revolving within 8 days, 7 or 8 days. And so it totally puts a lot of confusion on how fixed dates work compared to a cycling date is what we use today. And so for an example, what's a fixed date holiday we have today? 4th of July. 4th of July always comes at 4th of July, right? Well, what if you're a real good historian? I'm not, I'm just going to use this for an example. But anyway, what if you said, well, the 4th of July happened on Thursday. So I'm going to celebrate the first Thursday of July as the 4th of July. Well, you may celebrate it as the 4th of July, and you may convince yourself, and everybody thinks that that is the day of the 4th of July, the first Thursday. But it's not the fixed date. The 4th always comes at the same time, same year, varying less than a few hours apart. But if you do the Thursday, it could vary quite a bit. How many times does the 4th of July land on a Thursday? Once out of 7 or 8 years, right? So you know it's only going to land on the correct date in history on 1 out of 7 to 8 years. So if you put that in correlation with how we use our calendar now with a floating weekly cycle, then how many times does our Sabbaths or the Sabbaths that we use in our floating cycle actually correlate with the fixed Sabbath from the beginning of creation or even the feast days? And the answer is it may once in every 7 or 8 years. So that's where it gets real confusing. Because our whole system, our whole society is based off of a floating calendar. And that's why if a policeman wants to get any secure identification from you, what does he get? The only thing he can get that's secure, date of birth. Comes back at the same time every year. Oh, I was born on a Thursday. That's meaningless. So you're born on a Thursday. It's not a substantial. But today everything goes off of a weekly cycle. It's a floating cycle. And anyway, I thought I'd throw that out with you, stimulate your thought, and go with it however you want to go with it. That's about all I had.
It's a good study.
Yeah, if there's any time left, you can ask questions. But other than that, I don't know what our time is. I don't see any clocks.
I had a quick question. Sorry I was late, but I don't know, so I missed the beginning.
Well, I didn't know when you came in, so I don't know where it was.
But I missed the beginning, about 10, 15 minutes late. Did you talk about how you establish the month, and how do you know when you read in the Bible the 7th month, the 6th month, the 10th month? How do you know the difference between one month and the other?
You know, I looked a long time on that because that's a very debated.
You have like 15 months in a year?
I mean, wars have been fought over that issue, and
No, I understand, but I mean, can we have
the
15
Jews
months?
squabble over it, and the Arabs squabble over it, and everybody squabbles over it.
Can we have 15 months?
And I tried to find a substantial scriptural reference, and I could not really find anything. All I can find is from the beginning of time, and he said the beginning of the day is from even to even. So I figure, this is my own conclusion because I couldn't find anything. So I just came up with the only time of the year when the day and night is even is probably your equinox. It's all over the world the same time at the same time. It comes at the same time every year. And another interesting thing, if you go through, if you set all the dates and keep it a 7-year Sabbath schedule, if you do the math, you have 52 Sabbaths, and 7, it comes up to 364 days in the year, and then you have the 50th day, which is a Sabbath, which is 49 50th, double Sabbath. Just like the 49th and 50th year, it comes up to 365 days in a year, if you do the math. Anyway, I thought that was interesting too. The same calendar comes up to exact same days. The only problem is we have, nowadays, I guess we have 365 and a quarter days, so I don't know, throw another wrench in it.
I was curious, in your study, were you able to determine what date the fixed Sabbath date would be? If it was...
Well, like I said, I don't know. That's what I've looked. That's why I figured, like I said, I would figure from the equinox. So the equinox would be the first day, and then second day, third day, fourth day, all the way through the year till you get 365 days of the year all the way through.
So every year.
And so you have 52 Sabbaths, and which equals 364 days. But then you have the 50th day in there, which would add an extra day because you have 2. Well, actually, the Book of Jubilees talks a little bit about it. 52 Sabbaths in the 2 years equaling exactly the same, folding together like a page or whatever. Anyway, it comes up to 365 days is what I came up with the math on that, so, which I thought was interesting. So, any more questions? As long as we got lots of time.
You know that Yahweh does everything right. That's what the bottom line is.
I'm not a very good mathematician. Did you figure that, like, say for this year, this week, that was calculated out?
I could go, I didn't think we had time for it, but I could go deeper. I didn't know how many months of the year. I know the Jews claim there's 13 or something like that, and I could look all over from the scriptures for it, never could find it. All I could find was 12 months in a year. It talks about in Chronicles the captain of each month, and there was only 12 months, so I can only find anywhere in the scripture 12 months. I tried to figure out how many days were in a month. The closest I could come to is you get to the dates of Noah there. It tells when he got on the ark. Okay, he got on the ark the 17th day of the month, and he got the second month, and he got off the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, which it says was 150 days. That was 5 months, so you divide 150 by 5 and you come up with 30. So it's approximately a 30-day month.
The only example I know of in Scripture where it talks about a 13th month being called is when the prophet was instructed to lay on his left side so many days and on his right side so many days. And when he came, before he started that process and then after he did the process, when you add up the number of days, it shows that there was actually a 13-month year during that time period. That's the only...
That would be new to me. I don't know.
Yeah. That's the
It must not. You would have to add it up because I didn't find any 13-month or anything like that in the scripture. So
Yeah, it tells you the number of days. It tells you the date of the year when he appeared. And so when you added those together, there was a 13th month. That's the only example I know of.
but there's lots of scriptures in Chronicles when they had the captains of the month. And there's only 12 of them. So
And you can see that Yahweh really was precise, because when they went to send the space shuttles and things, they had to make up for Joshua's long day.
I never figured that in.
Yeah, I mean, they had to do
Maybe
that.
that was to take care of the quarter. You
Could have
actually
been.
it'd be the other way.
Well, but anyway, they said that they couldn't do it just on a precise thing. They had to do the biblical way to even send them into space.
So really, the 7-day week isn't really under scrutiny. It's more than a month that throws it off instead of 7 or 8 day cycle. Evolving is not really a 7-day segmented week as much as the months throws it off in correlation with what the day is. Because we name the days instead of numbering the days.
Yeah, we name it, which is on a 7-day cycle, which is floating. Whereas the days would be a set time to come. Like the 4th of July is a set time. It always comes. Your birthday is a set time. But the days of the week are floating, so it would cycle. So you say my Sabbath is on Saturday. Well, you may celebrate it Saturday, but it may not be Saturday, really, according. Because any day of the week that you name the same day of the week is floating. So it can't be a fixed day. It'll float within 8 days up or down either way. But a fixed day comes at the same time. You were born, I was born June 14th. That'll come around at the same time of year, every year, all the time. It doesn't change. Now, if I say I was born on a Wednesday, it may vary 7 days, and pretty soon you could float off even once. If you always went by a day of the week, if you didn't have the numbers, it would help you out.
Are these two systems working in correlation with each other, though? Biblically speaking, possibly?
I don't think that the name of the week. I think that's pretty much probably Roman. Probably started with Roman era or something. Probably a lot of nations combined. All of our history is a lot of combined stuff.
But the Sabbath was pretty fixed because it said on the 7th day. So
Yeah, that's what I was getting at through all the scriptures. Is 6 days and 7. It says nowhere in there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. I couldn't find it. I looked for it. In fact, when I studied it, I found out the main days of the week actually came about 240 years after Christ. Constantine was probably the one that they were arguing over which day was the first day and second day, and it was because this floating cycle was trying to work in, they were trying to figure stuff, and there was a bunch of confusion. So he said, I'm going to settle it. Sunday's the first day of the week. So he pretty much established Sundays and made it mandatory. So everybody didn't argue and squabble over this floating thing.
I have a couple questions. I'm sorry if I'm making you repeat yourself. But are you explaining that
with equinox, the year begins.
That's just my conclusion. I don't know. I'd have to study more.
And would that be a particular, is that the first day of a week, or is that the Sabbath day of a week? Where does that fall?
I just concluded with Genesis 1, he worked 6 days and rested the seventh, so I just figured the equinox would be the first day.
The first day. And then when you mentioned the 50th day a few minutes ago.
Well, the 50th day would be the 50th day from the wave sheet.
Right. Is that a first day of the week?
No. Well, yeah. Well, it's the 50th day is the Sabbath.
The 49th day is
Because like the Jubilees, I don't know, I guess they figure them different ways. Like the Jubilees of years, I'll kind of go to that because that's a little bit more plain. You work 7 years and have a Sabbath 7 years until you get to 49 years. And that's your Sabbath year of 49. Then you have the Jubilee, which is a double Sabbath, which is the 50th. Now, the question is that 50th, is that the continuation of the Sabbath, and the 51st year the beginning of the first year, or is the first of the next year that 50th year? How do you count it? That's your question, right?
Yeah.
So, by the conclusion of how many days he put in the year, I kind of went to the conclusion that if you look up Sabbaths, it's just not a specific time. A Sabbath could be a space of time very long. So I kind of looked at it as the 49th and 50th is actually one Sabbath. It's 1 day. So the 51st would be the beginning of the next week.
So when you count on tomorrow after the seventh Sabbath, 51 days?
For the 51 days would be
If
the
the
beginning of
49th
the
and
next
50th
week.
day are one Sabbath,
So that's kind of the way I figured.
how do you get to the
Actually,
day
the
of?
Jubilees are years,
Well, I
right?
understand.
Not the days.
Yeah, I think they're the same. However, you always establish them the same.
Yeah, I think it's,
So,
you did a good job.